In my last video, I reviewed two violins that I had out on trial from a violin maker near me called Perrin and Associates Fine Violins. They're in Baltimore City. I reviewed a Clement V5 and I reviewed an antique violin made in Dresden, Germany. And had just been going through this process over the last month or so about looking for a new instrument, looking for a new bow, and I decided I wanted to make a video to talk about it and to explain why I chose the violin that I did. So the first thing that happened when I called Perrin and Associates and I gave them my budget, told them what I wanted, I went in for this appointment and there were 6 or 7 violins on this table and 6 or 7 bows, and they said, go ahead, play them and let us know if you want to take any of them home on trial. It was really overwhelming at first. So the things that I tried to keep in mind, number one, was to get rid of anything that would cloud my judgment. I didn't want to hear anyone's opinions on these instruments. I didn't want to know which ones someone would recommend. I didn't pay attention to their appearance. Some of them were just not what I pictured. When I would think about the violin that I would want to own, they were kind of ugly. Some of them had fittings that I didn't like. The tailpiece or the chin rest was weird, but I didn't think about any of those things. I just wanted to experience them initially for what they are, for the tone and the sound, and not worry too much about these other things. I didn't ask about the history of any of the instruments. I know that Perrin takes violins and fixes them up. They will buy them from collectors or they'll source them from workshops. And they're called composite violins, where they might have, the back might be, older wood, but then they put new spruce on the front. So I didn't want to know any details about them. I just wanted to try them out. So the first ones that I took home, I thought that I really liked them, but I ended up realizing that they were just too heavy. Weight and size was a big thing for me when I worked on these. And I ended up calling them the next day and taking them back and just saying that, I really just don't want to work on these. The chin rests were also a big deal. Comfort was a big thing. But those things can be replaced. So the fittings, the tailpiece, the bridge, all of those things they can fix. Some of them, the bridge, the one that I really liked, it was a composite instrument. The bridge was very round. It just had a very deep curvature that I wasn't used to. And they said, oh, no, don't worry about it. We can just replace that for you. It's not a big deal. So that was really helpful to know. Another good thing that they did was they had someone in the shop that could play the violin for me from across the room, because then I could hear what I would sound like to someone else. We can only hear so much when we have the instrument right up in our ear and it's loud. But that was incredibly helpful to hear someone else play it in a big space so that I had an idea of what I was actually working with. And that was something too, when I took them home on trial, there were some experiences that I felt were really important. I played them in multiple different spaces in my house. Different, acoustics. The living room with the rug, isn't going to be, give me the same sound or tone as, standing in the stairwell playing it. So that was really helpful, listening to it in different types of spaces. I also purchased a couple different types of shoulder rests. I've loved playing with the Wolf Primo Forte. It only worked on some of the violins that I took out on trial. I just did not like it. So I bought 2 other ones from a local music shop. And some people would say, oh, shoulder rests are kind of all the same. But to me, that really made a big difference. Just working on, a different instrument with a different chin rest and just a different setup and balance really helped me to decide what was best and what worked better. Some of them I probably would have not, given a chance, because the shoulder rest that I thought was the best, wasn't working. So that was really helpful. Also, I really want to recommend to anyone looking to buy a new instrument to play your instrument with other musicians. I just loved that Clement V5 and I thought that it was great. It had a bright tone. It was really pretty. But I went to a rehearsal with my colleague who's a pianist, and we started working on this music we've been playing for a few weeks. And I thought it just sounded terrible. I wasn't getting the color that I wanted. It just wasn't giving an effective sound for what the two of us were working on. And that moment really helped me make this decision, knowing that it's not just me playing by myself. You're going to be playing your instrument in a variety of places with different people, and hearing it in collaboration with someone else was really critical to me making this decision. If you are playing in an orchestra or you're a soloist and you're going to be playing in a big hall or a big space all the time traveling, that is going to be something that maybe is different, because you're a soloist, you're playing for the person in the back row to hear you. You might want something that's very, very bright. But for me, the type of music that I play, or even just, personal preference, I just really liked this deeper, richer sound that this instrument has. A really cool thing I learned, and if you are working with a violin shop, you really need to have a shop with people there who will sit down and talk to you. Once I made the decision I wanted to buy this, I wanted as much information as I can, which they kind of didn't have, because no instrument made in 1890, in a different country is going to come with a pristine, printout of everything about it. So there really isn't a lot of information about this. But one thing I talked about on my last video was the back, the one-piece back that this violin has, which is kind of unique. Not all violins have this. Usually they're two-piece. So I asked the luthier about it, and he told me that normally when they cut the wood for violins, when they cut the maple, they cut it so that you can see the grain. But the way that this one is made, and one of the reasons that it has this deep, rich sound for being a small instrument, I talked about that in my last video too, is because they actually cut this wood slab cut, which is the opposite way. So it gives it a completely different tone, which I just think is really cool. So once I made the decision that this was the one I wanted to buy, I just wanted to know as much about it as I could. Those were the things I was holding back on in the beginning, because I didn't want a biased opinion of an instrument because it had a cool backstory or not a cool backstory. So that was just really fun. So all of those experiences and questions, and kind of the way I did it in the order that I did it, so that I didn't cloud my judgment initially, was just incredibly helpful. And I am just really, really happy. The biggest, most important piece of advice I would ever give to someone is to say to give yourself the gift of time. Take your time. At the end of the day, it's going to be you in your practice space alone working with this violin. So, other people's opinions and experiences and reviews or goals or sales goals are not going to matter at that point. It's really just going to be you working with what is kind of like a life partner for you. You've chosen this lifestyle as a musician, and you need to find something that works for you. No one else can really make that decision for you. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful. If you have experiences about looking for a new instrument or shopping around for a violin or other string instrument, please leave me a comment. I would love to hear about your experiences. And as always, thank you for watching.